Hi everyone, I wanted to make a video to show you how to create a mortgage amortization table. This is a great tool that allows you to visualize how you're paying off a house over a course of a number of years. A lot of times people finance them for up to 30 years, and what you can do is you can look at, for every pay period, what amount of principal do you have left, how do you calculate the payment of that payment, what goes to interest, what goes to principal, what's the ending balance at the end of that month, and just a really cool tool that allows you to take a little bit more control over how you pay off your house. So I'm going to pause this video for a second. I'm going to clear all this data and show you how to create it from scratch. Okay, I've cleared out all the data, and let's figure out how we create this thing. So step number one, create a hypothetical example. So I say, let's buy a house that is $150,000. Seems like a good place to start. And let's say I'm going to finance that house over the course of 30 years. You can do it in less than 30 years. Some people do 15, some people do 20. A lot of people opt for the 30-year payment because it gives you a lower monthly payment. Over the course of that 30 years, I'm going to be making monthly payments. So that's going to be 12 payments per year over the course of 30 years. So let's calculate the number of monthly payments I'm going to make. So that's going to be 30, the number of years multiplied by 12, which is going to give us 360 monthly payments I'm going to have to make before I pay this house off. Next, let's choose an interest rate. So right now, at the beginning of 2019, mortgage interest rates, if you have good credit, are somewhere in the neighborhood of 5.5%. Over time, we'll probably see that number go up. Sometimes it might go down. It just kind of depends on the economy and what the Fed's doing. But that's a good starting place. What we have to do in order to do these calculations correctly is figure out, since I'm making my payments monthly and interest is calculated monthly, how much interest is charged to me monthly. And I do that by saying, well, the annual rate is 5.5%. I'm going to divide that by 12 because there are 12 months in the year. So every month I'm being charged 0.458333% on the principal that's left. So just under 1/2 of 1% is what I'm paying in interest on the principal in any given month. The next step is I'm going to use a handy formula within Excel to calculate what my monthly payment is going to be in order to pay this $150,000 down to zero. The name of the formula is payments, but I just put in PMT equals PMT and then open up a parentheses, and then it gives me some help as to how I fill this out. So the first thing I put in is the rate, and that means interest rate per month, and I've already calculated that. It's going to be this number right here, 0.45833%. Then I hit comma, and then it asks me for the number of periods. In PER just means the number of periods, and I've already calculated that too. That's right here. I hit comma again. It asks me what is the present value. So the present value of the loan is $150,000, assuming I borrowed $150,000. Of course, you can make down payments to reduce that, but let's, for simplicity's sake, assume $150,000. Then I hit comma. It's going to ask me the future value. Well, I hope the future value is going to be zero. It would be great if I paid it off completely and could just be done with it. And then the final thing it'll ask you is, are you paying at the end of the period or the beginning of the period? This won't make a huge difference since we're going to be calculating for so many periods. But for the purposes of this exercise, we'll just say I'm paying at the end. So I put in 0. Now, I can already tell you one thing I forgot to do. I'm going to hit this and it's going to give me a negative number, which is, I guess, technically correct because I'm paying out that $851.68. One thing I'm going to do to make things easier on myself, easy to understand later, is that for the present value, which is this D1 figure right here, I'm going to put a negative. That just flips the calculation to give me a positive number instead. And it's really kind of a technical difference on how you use that formula, but this is how I use it. Next, I can start by calculating that first month's payment, how much of it is principal, how much of it is interest, and how much principal loan amount am I going to have left after that first payment. So I'm going to call it period 1, and let's just say I make that first payment on February 1st of 2019. So by beginning, I mean what's the principal at the beginning of that period. So I'm beginning with $150,000. And the payment I've already calculated. It's going to be $851.68. So I just equal that right there. While I'm at it, this is going to come in handy later. I'm going to hit F4. What that does is inserts those dollar signs, indicating that this is an absolute reference in Excel. So it'll keep that as I'm dragging it down later. It'll just keep it right static on that D6 cell. Next, I need to calculate how much interest I'm paying. The way that the bank calculates this is they take, well, what is the principal amount I have at the beginning? So that's $150,000, and they're going to multiply that by the monthly interest rate, which we calculated up here, which is that 0.458333%. I'm also going to want to lock this in as a static or an absolute reference, so I'm going to hit F4 again on that D5. Hit enter. So what this tells me is that out of my payment of $851.68, $687.50 of that goes toward interest. So to figure out how much of that payment goes toward principal, it's pretty simple. I just take the monthly payment amount, I subtract out the amount of interest, and I'm left with $164.18 of that payment goes toward actually paying down the loan. So to find how much I owe on the house after that first payment, I just say, well, I'm going to take what I owed at the beginning, which is $150,000. I'm going to subtract out the principal that I paid, and for later use, just to set ourselves up for some fun exercises later, I'm also going to subtract out any additional payment that I might make. Right now we're going to set that at 0, but we can play around with that later and see what, if I make additional payments, how early can I pay off that house. So next we move on to period 2, and this is going to be March of 2019. I don't have to enter this in every time. I'll show you how to do stuff really fast later. So the beginning amount I have is what was left at the end of last month, which is $149,835.82. So I set that cell equal to that. So that brings that right back down. And I do the same thing here. Now, the payment is always going to be the same here, just because we make equal monthly payments over the term of the loan. That is, of course, unless I'm making additional payments. So I can actually just drag this right down here to give me the same thing. Again, I just set it equal to the actual payment that I make. And then we do it again for the interest. So the amount of interest that I'll pay is going to be what I owed at the beginning, which is very slightly less than it was last month. And I'm going to multiply that by the monthly interest rate. Again, I'm going to make that cell absolute. So I pay a very similar amount of interest, very slightly less than last month, because the amount of principal I had at the beginning was also very slightly less. So how much of that payment went to principal? I take the payment amount, subtract out the amount of interest that I have to pay, and I get a number that's very similar to last month, but just slightly larger. So to figure out the ending balance, again, I say, well, how much did I owe at the beginning? I'm going to subtract out the principal that I paid, subtract out any additional payment that I made, and hit enter. To get, after 2 payments, I started with a $150,000 loan. Now I owe $149,670.88. So I've paid off just a very little bit. I'm going to repeat this process for 1 more month, and then I'm going to show you how to use the drag features in Excel to just do the rest of the calculations for us. Set the beginning balance equal to last month's ending balance. Payment is the same amount this month. Interest is going to change a little bit. Principal changed just a little bit as well. Take the beginning, subtract out the principal, subtract out any additional payment, and hit enter. Now is where I should be able to use Excel's drag feature to start dragging this down, and it starts to fill in the remainder of the numbers for me. I can continue this on down. So at 36 months, be 3 years. I started off with 150,000. Now I've paid it down to 145. So I'm making slow progress, but it's progress. Now I just keep on going. Remember, I'm going to have to go all the way down to 360. I'm going to stop here at 359, where I should have 1 payment left. And you can see as I go down to 360, it pays that ending balance down all the way to 0. One thing you'll notice here toward the end is that the amount of interest that you pay as a proportion of your payment is much less. The amount of principal, of course, is much more toward the end. Some people think that's a government conspiracy, but it's really just the way that loans work. Toward the beginning, you pay a lot more in interest per payment and less principal, but then toward the end, you pay a lot more principal and much less interest until you get paid all the way down. So because of the way that we set this up, I can change my numbers and it should automatically recalculate everything for me. So for instance, let's change that amount that I borrowed to 200,000, and you can see it automatically adjusts all the numbers for me because we set it up correctly. I can change it to 250,000, same thing, it recalculates everything. I can even adjust the amount of years that I finance for. So we use 30 years, but I could change that to 20. It adjusts the number of periods. It makes the monthly payment go up, but I pay it off quicker. Same thing if I change it to 15, it adjusts everything for me. So that's why this is pretty handy to have this set up correctly from the beginning. And I can just play around with the numbers and sort of figure out with my budget what's going to work best for me. I'm going to change this back to our original numbers and then imagine what happens if we make additional monthly payments to try to pay down the principal of the loan down quicker. So for example's sake, let's say that we're going to pay $100 extra per month, and then I drag that down and I watch how it starts to pay off the loan quicker, reducing that ending balance. And what I'm going to keep doing is just sort of drag all the way down until I reduce the ending balance down to 0. So getting closer here, still got a ways to go. So I'm going to pay off the loan somewhere between the 280 and 281st payment, as opposed to the 360 that it took me earlier. So quite a bit of difference in the amount of time that I have to pay off that loan. Just for a quick visualization, to figure out how many years that is, I just take the 280 for simplicity's sake, divided by 12. So 23 years, 23 and a third years, as opposed to 30. So making that 100 additional dollar payment per month to reduce that principal, it's only $100 a month, but it shaved somewhere between 6 and 7 years off the total loan period. So getting that house paid off to where I don't have that mortgage payment anymore. 6 and 7, somewhere between 6 and 7 years early, which is pretty great. You know, if you make an additional payment, you can pay it off even quicker. So that's how this table works. If you ever have any questions, feel free to ask.